Picture this. You're at a social gathering, surrounded by the hum of conversation. People are exchanging pleasantries, discussing the weather, weekend plans, or the latest TV show. You nod politely, sip your drink, and attempt to engage. But inside, you feel drained, disengaged, like you're performing a role rather than truly participating. The small talk drags on, and with each passing minute, your energy fades. You start eyeing the nearest exit, yearning for solitude or a conversation that actually matters. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. For many introverts, small talk isn't just mildly annoying, it's exhausting. But why? Why does something that seems so natural for others feel so draining to you? The key lies in the way introverts process social interactions. Unlike extroverts who gain energy from socializing, introverts expend energy during conversations, especially those that feel superficial. Small talk can feel like empty calories. It fills the space, but it doesn't nourish the mind. Introverts crave depth, meaning, and authentic connection, which is why lighthearted banter can feel more like a chore than a pleasure. We'll dive deep into the psychology of introverts and why small talk feels so draining. To understand why small talk feels exhausting for introverts, we need to look at how their brains process social interactions differently from extroverts. The difference isn't just a personality trait. It's rooted in neuroscience. The key difference between introverts and extroverts. Studies in neuroscience have shown that introverts and extroverts have fundamentally different ways of processing stimuli, including social interactions. The main difference lies in how much stimulation their brains prefer and how they process information. Extroverts have a high threshold for stimulation. Their brains seek external engagement, meaning they feel energized by social interaction, loud environments, and spontaneous conversations. Introverts, on the other hand, have a lower threshold. Their brains process stimuli more deeply, which can quickly lead to overstimulation. This makes prolonged socializing, especially superficial interactions like small talk, feel mentally draining rather than energizing. Another reason introverts experience small talk differently is their reliance on the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest, digestion, and deep thinking. Introverts' nervous systems are more geared toward reflection and focus rather than rapid external engagement. This means introverts tend to analyze and process conversations deeply rather than responding impulsively. Instead of jumping from topic to topic like an extrovert might, an introvert prefers to think before they speak, leading to a preference for meaningful conversations over fleeting social exchanges. Small talk, which requires quick back-and-forth exchanges with little depth, forces an introvert into a mode of interaction that doesn't feel natural to them. Their brain wants to slow down, process, and engage in something meaningful. But small talk doesn't allow for that. Why extroverts thrive on socializing, while introverts find it overwhelming. One of the biggest differences between introverts and extroverts lies in how their brains respond to dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. Extroverts have a higher tolerance for dopamine, meaning they feel energized and excited by social interactions. The more engagement they have, the more their brain rewards them with dopamine, making them crave even more socializing. Introverts, however, are more sensitive to dopamine. Their brains don't need as much stimulation to feel full. In fact, too much dopamine, such as the kind triggered by prolonged socializing, can quickly become overwhelming. Instead, introverts rely more on acetylcholine, another neurotransmitter that promotes deep focus, introspection, and thoughtful conversations. This is why introverts often prefer meaningful one-on-one discussions over casual socializing in groups. But why this makes small talk draining for introverts? Since small talk is fast-paced, surface-level, and often repetitive, it doesn't activate the deep thinking pathways that introverts thrive on. Instead, it overloads their brain with unnecessary stimulation, forcing them into a high-energy state that feels unnatural and exhausting. So, when an introvert finds themselves stuck in a conversation about the weather or the latest viral meme, their brain isn't engaged. It's resisting. Their nervous system is telling them to slow down, process, and focus on something more meaningful. But in social settings, that's not always possible, which leads to fatigue. To understand why introverts struggle with small talk, we need to break down what it actually is and why it feels so unfulfilling to them. What is small talk? Small talk is a form of social interaction that serves as a bridge between deeper conversations or as a way to establish social bonds without requiring much effort. It's often light, polite, and centered on neutral topics like the weather, weekend plans, daily routines, TV shows or sports, generic pleasantries like "How are you?" and "What's new?" For many people, small talk is comfortable. It's a way to ease into conversations, fill awkward silences, or simply maintain social norms. But for introverts, it often feels like a pointless chore. Why introverts prefer deep, meaningful conversations. Introverts don't dislike conversation itself. What they dislike is shallow conversation. They crave depth, complexity, and authenticity in their interactions. Instead of discussing the weather, an introvert would much rather talk about life philosophies, psychology and human behavior, personal goals and struggles, thought-provoking ideas, meaningful experiences. This preference for depth isn't just about personal taste. It's hardwired into how introverts process the world. Since they engage in deeper cognitive processing, they find superficial discussions mentally unengaging and, in turn, exhausting. Why small talk feels empty to introverts. The biggest issue introverts have with small talk is that it lacks intellectual or emotional engagement. Here's why. 1. It's repetitive and predictable. Small talk often follows the same script, making it feel routine rather than stimulating. Introverts prefer novelty and exploration in their conversations. 2. It doesn't create real connection. Introverts seek authenticity in interactions, and small talk often feels like a mask, something people do out of obligation rather than genuine interest. 3. It doesn't activate deep thinking. Since introverts process information more thoroughly, they enjoy conversations that challenge their minds. Small talk, by contrast, stays at the surface level and doesn't require much thought. 4. It can feel emotionally draining. Engaging in small talk often forces introverts to act against their natural tendencies, which leads to social fatigue. They may feel like they're performing rather than having a real conversation. The disconnect between introverts and social norm society tends to value extroverted traits, and small talk is often seen as a necessary skill for making connections. But for introverts, this expectation feels unnatural. They don't want to chat for the sake of chatting. They want real, meaningful conversations. However, since small talk is the gateway to deeper interactions, introverts often find themselves in a dilemma. Endure the superficiality or risk missing out on meaningful connections altogether. Why introverts feel drained faster. One of the biggest reasons small talk exhausts introverts is the concept of the social battery. Unlike extroverts, who often feel recharged by social interactions, introverts experience socializing as energy draining rather than energizing. Imagine your energy levels as a battery. For an extrovert, engaging in conversations, even surface-level ones, adds power to their battery. For an introvert, the opposite happens. Each interaction depletes their battery, especially if it lacks depth or purpose. This means that the more small talk an introvert has to engage in, the faster their energy runs out. By the end of a long day filled with social obligations, they may feel mentally and physically exhausted, needing time alone to recharge. Low stimulation versus high stimulation socializing. Not all social interactions affect introverts in the same way. The level of stimulation plays a huge role in determining how draining or fulfilling a conversation feels. Low stimulation socializing, recharge mode. One-on-one conversations with close friends. Deep discussions about personal experiences or ideas. Meaningful storytelling and reflection. Silent companionship, being around someone without constant talking. High stimulation socializing, drain mode. Group interactions with fast-paced discussions. Constant switching between multiple conversations. loud environments, parties, networking events, small talk that lacks depth and engagement. Why does small talk feel so draining? Because it's a high stimulation activity with low reward for introverts. It requires mental effort without offering the meaningful connection that fuels their social energy. How small talk forces constant social adjustments. Small talk isn't just exhausting because of its superficial nature. It's also demanding because it requires constant social adjustments. 1. Reading and responding to social cues. Introverts process information deeply, meaning they are hyper-aware of social dynamics. Keeping up with casual conversation while analyzing tone, body language, and timing can be overwhelming. 2. Masking and adapting to social expectations. Many introverts feel pressure to appear engaged in small talk, even when they find it uninteresting. This requires emotional labor, which depletes their energy. 3. Jumping between topics without depth. Unlike deep conversations where thoughts can flow naturally, small talk requires quick topic shifts without any real connection. This can feel like mental whiplash for introverts who prefer to dive into a subject fully. The pressure to maintain the conversation. Introverts often worry about keeping small talk going, which creates an additional layer of stress. They may overthink responses, struggle to come up with appropriate topics, or feel awkward about long pauses. All of these factors contribute to mental fatigue, making even a short period of small talk feel exhausting. For many introverts, small talk isn't just tiring. It can also be mentally and emotionally taxing. The combination of social anxiety, overthinking, and the discomfort of forced interactions makes these conversations feel more like an obstacle than a natural exchange. Why small talk can trigger social anxiety in introverts. While not all introverts experience social anxiety, many find small talk particularly stressful due to the uncertainty and lack of control involved. Fear of awkward silences. Small talk is fast-paced, and introverts often feel pressure to keep the conversation going. The fear of running out of things to say can trigger anxiety. Worrying about saying the wrong thing. Unlike deep conversations where thoughts flow naturally, small talk can feel forced. Introverts may overanalyze their words, worrying they might sound uninteresting or out of place. Discomfort with surface-level interactions. Because introverts crave authenticity, they may feel uneasy engaging in discussions that feel shallow or unnecessary. This can make them seem distant, even when they want to connect. The result? A heightened sense of self-awareness and stress, making small talk feel more like a performance than a conversation. The overthinking loop. Why small talk feels draining. One major reason introverts struggle with small talk is their tendency to overthink responses instead of going with the flow. Unlike extroverts, who may respond quickly and instinctively in conversations, introverts often process information deeply before speaking. Here's what happens inside an introvert's mind during small talk. 1. Someone asks a simple question like, "How's your day going?" 2. Instead of instinctively replying, "Good, how about you?" the introvert's brain starts evaluating possible responses. Do they actually want to know? Or is this just politeness? Should I give a detailed answer or keep it short? What's the right response here? 3. By the time they settle on an answer, the moment may have passed, or their response may come across as hesitant, making them feel even more self-conscious. This constant mental processing adds to the exhaustion, making even brief social exchanges feel like a mental workout. The pressure of forced interactions. Feeling fake or inauthentic. Another psychological toll of small talk is that it often feels forced, which makes introverts feel like they're not being their true selves. They may feel pressured to act more outgoing than they are, which can feel fake or exhausting. They may struggle to engage in topics that don't genuinely interest them, leading to feelings of detachment. They may feel guilty for wanting to leave a conversation early, even though they're mentally drained. Over time, this can lead to social burnout, where introverts start avoiding interactions altogether just to escape the discomfort of forced small talk. Since small talk is often unavoidable, introverts need ways to make it feel less exhausting and more meaningful. The good news? Small talk doesn't have to be a mind-numbing chore. It can actually serve as a gateway to deeper conversations if approached correctly. Reframing small talk. A necessary first step. Instead of seeing small talk as meaningless chatter, introverts can reframe it as a tool for connection. It's not the final destination. It's just the bridge that leads to more engaging discussions. Small talk establishes comfort before diving into deeper topics. It helps introverts gauge the other person's interests before steering the conversation. It allows for natural, low-pressure social interaction rather than forcing depth too soon. By shifting their mindset, introverts can use small talk strategically instead of resisting it outright. Steering small talk towards something more engaging. Instead of suffering through surface-level topics, introverts can subtly guide small talk into something more interesting by using meaningful questions. Some effective techniques include expanding on generic questions. Instead of just saying, "I'm good, how about you?" When asked how your day is, you could add, "Actually, I've been thinking a lot about topic. Have you ever thought about that?" Asking deeper follow-ups. If someone mentions their job or hobby, ask, "What do you love most about it?" Or, "How did you get into that?" Introducing a thought-provoking topic naturally. If a conversation is stuck in small talk mode, you can casually say, "This reminds me of something I was reading the other day about. Interesting topic. What's your take on that?" By nudging the conversation in a more engaging direction, introverts can avoid draining chit-chat and find common ground with others. Setting boundaries. When to engage and when to step away. While improving small talk skills is useful, introverts don't have to force themselves into every conversation. It's important to set boundaries and recognize when to engage and when to politely exit a draining discussion. Know your limits. If you feel socially exhausted, it's okay to take breaks or step away. Use exit strategies. If a conversation feels too forced, try gracefully ending it with, "It was great catching up. I'm gonna grab some food, drink for a bit. I need to check in with someone, but let's continue this later." Prioritize quality over quantity. Instead of feeling pressure to socialize with everyone, focus on a few meaningful interactions that won't drain your energy. Introvert-friendly conversation techniques. There are small, effective ways introverts can make small talk feel more natural without forcing themselves to be overly extroverted. 1. Observation-based comments. Instead of diving straight into a topic, introverts can comment on their surroundings to ease into a conversation. "That's an interesting piece of art. What do you think of it?" "I love the music they're playing here. Do you listen to this kind of thing?" 2. Open-ended questions. Asking questions that require more than a yes-no answer can help move conversations beyond small talk. Instead of, "Did you have a good weekend?" Try, "What was the most interesting thing you did this weekend?" 3. Let the other person talk. People love talking about themselves. Instead of feeling pressured to carry a conversation, introverts can focus on listening and asking occasional follow-ups. 4. Lean into shared interests. If a topic sparks genuine curiosity, introverts can use that as an opportunity to create a more meaningful connection. Small talk can feel draining for introverts because their brains process interactions more deeply, making surface-level conversations exhausting rather than energizing. But that doesn't mean they have to force extroverted behavior. Instead, introverts can navigate socializing in ways that feel more natural, steering small talk toward deeper topics, setting boundaries, and embracing meaningful conversations. You don't have to change who you are to connect with others. True connection isn't about how much you talk, but about the quality of your interactions. So, how do you handle small talk? Do you have any tricks that make it easier? Let me know in the comments.